Hey everyone, welcome back. This week we are discussing embracing the photographic experience with Walter Elliott. You are listening to the LAKESCAPE Photography Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the LAKESCAPE Photography Podcast. This week, I am joined by Walter Elliott. Walter, go ahead and say hi, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Walter Elliott. I'm a landscape and I do other photography as well, but I think that's mainly the stuff that I post. And I'm from the Great Lakes region, West Michigan. And I'm very, very thrilled and happy to be here with you today.
Well, I certainly appreciate you being here to share some of your stories and talk photography, man. It's exciting. Go ahead and share some of your background in photography. Tell us what you've done, where you've been, some of your favorite projects.
Well, ever since I was a kid, we've always had some type of camera around the house. I come from a family of seven, the youngest of seven. And so I remember the old Polaroids. We always had the Kodak camera with the film. And I always loved taking pictures, but it really started getting serious back in, I believe it was 85. My brother's wife had a camera from an old boyfriend, not too long ago, but it was a Canon A1. It was barely used. So she gifted it to me. And boy, it was like kid in a candy store. And so just reading through, I love reading through instruction books. I know I'm kind of weird like that, but just reading through it and see all the things you can do with it. So I started shooting film. And then in high school, I had a couple of math teachers that were photographers as well. And every other summer they would go up to Alaska, take a trip. And one of them, the day before Christmas break, would do a slideshow of his trips. And I just loved it. And so the other teacher, though, offered a class after school. And so I took it. It was like a 4 or 5 week class, a couple of days after school. Learned some of the basics, the Sunny 16 and the rule of thirds, and just some basics, how to load the film. And back then we wrote down everything. When we took a shot, we wrote down all of our settings. So we knew
the little notepad.
Like. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I did some of that through high school and did some for the yearbook. And when I got into college, it was just so expensive. So I just kind of put it on the shelf, and I always wanted to get back into it, but it wasn't until digital photography came along. And back in 2014, I do a lot of trips up to the UP. And so in 2014, I thought, man, kind of nice to have a camera. But so I had a few friends that are into, they graduated from Kendall, they had art degrees. And I asked them, and most of them were, protecting their babies. They didn't want that camera to get, damaged up in the UP. But I had a really good friend, his name's Jeremy, who not only let me use this camera, but gave me all kinds of lenses and tripod. And so I had a lot of fun and got back, and the pictures were okay, not great. But my wife said, well, why don't you just buy a camera? Well, we have 5 kids and we don't really have the extra money. And she said, well, you'll never know where this will lead. And so I bought my first digital, which was a Canon T3i. And it just kind of took off. I on my own personal social media, I'd post some of the shots, and people started praising, and then they started asking to purchase. And so it just kind of escalated from there, and step by step. And then in 2014, that fall, when I first started shooting, I had a photo of the pier in Grand Haven. It was looking back in the fog, and there were like ghostly people standing there. And so I entered that shot in Grand Haven's Art Walk, which is like Art Prize in Grand Rapids, but a smaller venue. And I actually took first in the juried photography. And so that's when I thought, okay,
awesome.
Well, maybe I have something here. And so from there, it's kind of, back then when I was first shooting, I thought, okay, I've got this great shot, but I don't know if I'll ever get another nice shot. It's like, will I ever get something as good as this? But it's been a lot of fun learning, and the people that I've met along the way, the other photographers, have been incredible. I'm sure you have this experience, but you meet a new photographer, and it's always nice. They're always sharing information and talking about experiences. And even the people that aren't in photography, if I'm I'm set up somewhere and people come over and talk to you. An incredible way to, share experiences with other people. So it's been a crazy ride the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, it sounds awesome though. Like you've certainly, done a lot. Your background with it is it's extensive. That's great. I mean, especially I really liked what you said about how you meet people. And it's kind of like this great uniter where even people that aren't necessarily photographers, they just want to come and check out what you're doing. They want to say hi. And, it's a great way to network with people. It's a great way to meet new people. But those photographers that you meet along the way that kind of help shape that journey, how people, initially maybe they were a little reserved about loaning gear to you. And then you found
Yeah.
somebody that was like, yeah, you know what? Here, take this and go out and see what you can do. And that seed was planted. And it's just that mutual passion, that love for photography. And now look where we are today. You do some great work out there. I
Thank you.
I love seeing your shots and the different shots of Grand Haven. You actually, a few of your shots inspired me to take a very brief trip up there last year. It was cold. I think it was either April or March. But yeah, it was cold. Nobody was getting out of the car. It was dark. And I was like, well, I'm at least going to drive through and look at it. But as you went along, starting with film and then moving into digital and then, kind of developing your creative vision and your style and everything, were there people along the way that you would consider mentors or people that helped kind of shape your inspiration and your approach to different things?
Yeah, I had an uncle. He passed away in 2018. When I was a kid, he was the guy with the camera at all the family outings. And he lived out in Connecticut. But when he passed away, I inherited. He has over 10,000 slides. He always shot with slides, and he went all over the world. He was single, never married, and so a project in the horizon for me is to scan all of his slides and put them in collection. But all over, he hiked the Appalachian Trail and visited different countries. So he was always I always kind of watched what he was doing, and I have some of his photos. So that was a big inspiration for me. As a matter of fact, I use his tripod now. It's an old Gitzo, and it's ancient, and it's heavy, and it's awesome. And people will come up to me, especially older photographers, and they'll go, "Oh, I haven't seen one of those in a long time." So kind of channel him through that, which is nice. And and I don't remember the photographer's name, but I have a couple of photos of his from basically calendar photo books when I was growing up. And one is it's a hawk, and it's just a silhouetted hawk at night with a lightning flash behind it. And he's got another one of a golden eagle. And just when you see those shots, or even like looking through magazines, and I'd rip stuff out of magazines. I have a shot of just this young boy laying on a floor with a dog sleeping next to him, but the whole scene, it draws you in there, and emotionally, ties you. And so I think whenever I see anything where I feel like I've been there, or I feel like I can be there. As a matter of fact, I just on Instagram, I follow a guy from Indiana, and he had a shot out in a field of some deer at sunset, and it just brought me back to my childhood, and just remind me of. So I'm always keeping my eyes open for anybody's work. And when I see stuff and I'm in awe, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I hope I can do something like this someday. So yeah.
Yeah, that inspiration that you look at something and it draws on those emotions. It brings back memories. That's one of the things that I think really drew me to photography myself too, was the story, the emotion that an image can evoke, and it kind of transports you to a different place or to a different time. And that's kind of that thing that you had mentioned earlier. I actually thought of it while you were while you were talking about how, you take an image and you wonder like, hey, can I do that again? Can I repeat this? And then you see somebody else's work. And like you just said, it's a lot of that same thing where it's like, can I do that? Could I take an image like that? And it's that interesting balance of being inspired, being your own worst critic, but also just being passionate about getting out there and you just keep doing it because you love it.
Yeah. And that's, a lot of times people ask me, well, how do you get to that level, the next level? And the first thing I always say is shoot. Shoot every day. I don't care if you're out in your backyard shooting grass creatively or whatever it is. Just have that camera in your hand, and you're going to make a lot of photos that aren't great, or you're going to be a failure at some things. But just keep going, and you're gonna get your niche and create something along the way. So, I was going to mention something too. Along the way, I remember the first time that first few times that I was out like shooting the sunset, or really getting serious, and I walked away not remembering the situation. I couldn't. Usually, I have a very vivid memory of things, and I couldn't remember it, and it brought me back to my brother who was stationed in Okinawa. He was in the Air Force, and he would like just take photos of there just to remember his experience. And he said the older Japanese people would shun and they wouldn't want their pictures taken because they felt like their soul was going to be captured forever in there, and they were afraid of that.
I've heard of
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, and so I kind of had that thought that my experience was so much in getting this shot right away. I got to get this perfect. I didn't have time to really take the situation in. And so from that point on, I made it a lot of times where I'll take a few moments just to step away from the situation to soak it in. So I have my own memory of it, and then go back and make the photos and create that scene. But it's still always, even though photography is wonderful, it's always about that moment being there. That's personal for me, that nobody else will have that. So yeah, that was an interesting thing.
Yeah, it's that experience where, it's something that I have to tell myself a lot of the time too, to don't experience everything through the viewfinder. It's good to take a step back and actually be present sometimes, all the time with things, because I've had moments like that too where you get to an awesome spot, you take a bunch of pictures, and then you get back to the car, you sit down and you're like, what did I just do? I have the pictures, but I don't really remember the experience because I was too busy taking pictures. It brings this hike from last spring to mind for me. I finally hiked, I was in the Porcupine Mountains, finally hiked back to Shining Cloud Falls. I was so excited that I made it there. I was just taking pictures, just one after the other. And then on the hike back out, it hit me. I was like, I don't I don't actually really recall much of the experience other than seeing it for the first time and then walking away. So I had to go back later in July and I was like, okay, this time I'm going to be calm. I'm going to do this the right way. And it's a good reminder to, especially as creators, as artists, appreciate what we're out there for to begin with.
Right, right. I had, yeah, that's similar with the last total solar eclipse. I was in Greenfield, Indiana, and we had 4 minutes this time, which was incredible compared to 2 minutes the last time. But you want to get as many shots as you can. But I made it a point where I took a step back and just looked, and that's my most vivid memory of it, is just seeing it without the viewfinder or whatever. I saw a guy on Canon's social media who he must have had 4 or 5 cameras set up, and he had like different angles, different shots, and he's went through it all. And I watched it, and then it's like this guy didn't get a chance to experience it. I'm like, kind of felt bad for him a little bit, but I mean, he had some really nice shots too. So Yeah. They'll probably pay for him to go anywhere anyway, so he'll get the next one.
Yeah,
So
right. You
yeah.
you see those guys out there with like, 100 grand worth of kit, and you're like, yeah, well, that's interesting.
Yeah. 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 How do I get there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. How do I get the special Nikon, Canon, whatever box of goodies?
Yeah.
That's huge. And it's something that I try to remind myself of a lot too is, just be present, nature first, photo second, and just take it all in. You go there for the joy of being present. You go there because you love these places. You love what you're doing, and you want to capture and share those moments that kind of define that adventure and kind of define that experience. But at the same time, you have to remember to experience it yourself too.
It's nice too because it gives me an excuse. If I didn't have a camera, I definitely wouldn't be out at the beach at 3 in the morning shooting the aurora. But I'm out there and I get to experience what most people are. They're in their bed sleeping, and I'm out there witnessing this and thinking, I got to work in the morning, but hey, I get to see this. So that's crazy.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I really I think it's a mutually enjoyed experience amongst photographers is we're out there experiencing things, seeing things that maybe people overlook, maybe people just don't typically see, especially with how active the aurora has been over the last couple years. And that big storm back in May, I got off work, I got right in my car, I started driving just as far north as I could go, and I'll never forget it. I was somewhere I was almost to Minnesota. I was like, I'm gonna keep going until I see it. And the sun had set, a storm had just cleared, and even with there still being some light left in the sky from sunset, there was this giant red pillar right off to my left. And I whipped off the highway. I put the car in park. I just got out my camera. I was on the phone with my wife. I was like, you can't believe how incredible this is. And I shot it all night. And it's one of the best memories I have in photography in recent years because like you said, it's one of those things that it's it's an experience as much as it is a almost I mean, what's beyond an experience? Like a soul shaping experience? I don't know.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it touches you in a way that it moves you, it changes you, and then you realize people like these are the things that not everybody gets to see, not everybody gets to enjoy. And because of this curiosity formed out of photography and a love for the outdoors, a love for being in nature, I'm here witnessing this incredible thing. And it's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll when I have downtime, I'll go through Google Maps, and I love to go around the world and find obscure places, and I have all these uh, pegs on my map of things that I found that are so remote and out there, and I'd love to be there and you know just share that with everybody, but just to be there in person and see this. And I'm very thankful for people who share their photos. And I started sharing mine on Google Maps years ago, just because it gives me like if I've never been to a place, I'll go in and look at different angles, different ideas, where people have stood, and I'm like, oh, this might be kind of interesting. And so I thought, well, maybe I should start sharing some of mine with people so they can get an idea of the beauty of the world. But yeah, I mean, remote places in the desert, like in Morocco, or lighthouses in Argentina at the bottom of, at the end of the world. Yeah, those are all, when our kids grow up, and they go on, that's when we get to do that. So
Yeah, the bucket list locations that yeah, I think I have a lot of pins myself all over the Great Lakes, the world. I spend a lot of time doing the same thing. Like, you're sitting there eating lunch or whatever, you take your phone out and I'll look around up in like the far northern parts of Canada and I'm like, all right, Where is someplace so obscure, so off the map that nobody would ever look, and what can I find there? And sometimes you can find photos that people have shared of just these wild locations. And it's incredible that this stuff is just out there. And it, of course, with some logistics, you can get there. But I love doing that, just exploring, seeing what's out there and kind of, putting that plan in motion of, hey, one day I'm going to see this. I'm going to stand right there. I'm going to look at this. When it comes to your photography and, you've been doing this for a while, all these different experiences and all these subjects and exploring different areas here in the Great Lakes and beyond the Great Lakes, how would you say those experiences have shaped your style and inspired you throughout the years?
Well, I think we were talking about going to remote places that when I started shooting digital in 2014, I mean, there were people that were sharing their photos and few photographers out there, but a lot of times I'd be the only person at a place. And so it was, my oyster to crack. However I wanted to do it. And I usually, take a variety of different angles and, what would this look like? And, for instance, I was in Holland one time and shooting my friend Dave Behrens, and the ice was moving, but it was kind of moving slow. And, we're both long exposure guys. Actually, I got into it because of him. Just a side note, I met him once and one of the first times, and we were just kind of talking, and I'm like, "Oh, how long are you shooting?" I was shooting like a 30-second exposure, thinking that was really long. He's like, "I got 5 minutes," and I'm like, "Wow, you can shoot that long?" And he's like, so I got into that, and so one time we were out in Holland, and the ice was moving, and there was a nice reflection, and we're like, "Okay, this is cool," but gosh, we both looked at each other and said, Wonder how this would look like with a 5 minute exposure." So we set it up and it just turned out so cool. Nothing I would ever imagined. And so I'm always looking for something different because lighthouses have been photographed for so long. And one of my favorite things to do is shoot storms. And I love lightning only for the fact that you can't replicate strikes of lightning. So if you get something, somebody can't run right out and say, "Oh, I want to get that same exact shot." You just can't do that. And so I'm always looking for something new. And as the years have gone on, and more people get inspired, and more people out there, and digital photography is getting so there's so it's possible for anybody to shoot. So now it's like a lot of people are getting the same shots because eventually somebody's going to figure it out. It's not even necessarily that you're looking at your work. It's just like they're going to be at that angle. So I think over the years, it's like, how can I reinvent something that I've shot for so many times? And I liken it to a significant other or a spouse or even like a grandparent. You've known them for so long, but there's always that time when they tell a story or they do something, you go, "Wow, that never seen that before. You never told me that story." And so how can I go out there and do something that nobody else has done? It's getting more and challenging, but uh, I think that's what I like to do. It's like, anybody can do a sunset shot, being right there, but what else would make this exciting? Whether it be a long exposure or whether it be, using stopping down your aperture so you get more of the diffraction spikes, or whatever it may be. It's just trying to do something different. And I think that's kind of what's really pushed me further. And then and seeing other people's stuff and saying, "Wow, I never thought that of doing something like that." And I'm one that I don't necessarily like, I see something I like and I don't want to run out and copy that person's shot because that's their vision. But then I'll say, okay, so how can I make this different? When I was a kid, there was a commercial. I remember BASF was the company, and their slogan was, "We don't make things, we make things better." And so it's like, okay, so how can I take something that's already out there and put my own flair and my own design on it? So I'm sure you probably experience. I know a lot of the professional photographers or people that are really into it. They kind of have that itching to do something different. So
That's something that's unique. And that's It's interesting that you said that about BASF because I always kind of thought it was like my own little quirk, but I always reminded myself of something Steve Jobs said, and he said, "Don't be first, be best." And I feel like it can be taken a lot of different ways, and it's certainly not meant, at least my interpretation of it is not meant to be like pompous or arrogant. My interpretation of it is more along the lines of you don't have to be the first one, but you have to be original. When it comes to being quote unquote best, it's about being original, being true to yourself, being authentic, and taking that something that's been done 1,000 times and making it better, making it yours, putting your spin on it. And I do a lot of the same stuff. Like anybody that shoots with me, they know I love my solid neutral density filters. I'm always, shooting long exposures. I'm always stopping down and just trying to get some kind of movement or motion. I like to include that energy in my images if I can. I mean, obviously there's some circumstances where maybe you're shooting, from the Porcupine Mountains. If you're at the overlook, there's really not much you can do there to show movement. I mean, you could do a long exposure and drag the clouds or something if they're moving fast enough, but it's putting that little creative piece of yourself into it that really makes it jump out. And I really like what you said there about how those different experiences kind of culminated into a style. And I feel like that's something that all of us as landscape photographers, as photographers really in general, we all kind of go through that of we start and we're just going through the motion of, okay, this is how you take a picture. And then it becomes, well, if I change these settings, what happens? And then you see somebody else's work and you start translating little bits and pieces into your own. And then before you know it, all of it comes together. And now you're taking bits and pieces of other people's work, translating it into your own, but you're taking and drawing on those experiences from all that experimentation, and you're kind of developing that style like you just explained. And I love the way you explained it. It was right spot on.
I appreciate that. There's another quote from a band from Canada, Tragically Hip, and they have a song. And one of my life quotes, because I have kids, is "You teach your children some fashion sense, and they fashion some of their own." And I mean, that's what we do. We take what's around us and see it, and then hopefully, put our own into it. So I have another. You can't see it, of course, but it's on my second screen. It's one of the photos I have up. But I was in Muskegon on a summer day, and sunshine, some clouds in the sky, nothing too great. And so I'm out there. I'm like, well, I'm out here. And so then the clouds are moving. I'm like, oh, maybe if I do, put a filter on and do a nice 3 or 4 minute shot. And so I did that, and then okay, well that looks okay, but so I was started tinkering a little bit more, and I'm like, I wonder how this would look in black and white. And then it started looking really nice, and then I thought, well, you know what? I wonder how that land or the lighthouse would look if that was red and everything else was in black and white. And so it was step by step, and then by the end of it, on some ordinary day, it turned out to be one of my favorite personal shots, and it just created itself by you trying to do something different with it and make something. Now, as a side note, I always like to, if I'm going to share something, especially if it's sunset or whatever, I try to make it for the most part look like I saw it. So if I share it, people kind of get this sense of being there. But I mean, there's times when you're doing long exposure. It's like, okay, well, this is going to look totally different. So, and some people don't understand it, so I have to put that in the title. Like, look, this was a 2 minute shot where I had the exposure for 2 minutes. It was open for 2 minutes, and so some people don't understand photography, still don't quite get that, but I try to explain as best as possible. But yeah, so
Right. And I think that's one of the challenges too is, when we translate that creative vision into our work where we're doing long exposures, the clouds are streaking or the waterfall that we're shooting is all nice, and the water looks all misty and ethereal. I get questions too where people are like, "How did you do that? Does it really look that way?" And like, well, no. It was a 30-second, 5-second, whatever exposure. And photographers, yeah, we know what we're saying to each other, but it's those things where when you really go out, I don't want to say go far out on a limb, but when you really put your creativity into something and just make it your own, that yeah, sometimes you have to you have to include that in the notes when you're sharing it. I do it a lot with my astrophotography, where I'll take a completely different exposure for the sky, but I'll shoot the foreground at the same time, two separate exposures, say, 30 seconds to get the Milky Way in the sky, and then, 5 minutes of exposure time to get the dark foreground nice and bright so that I can blend the two together. And, you gotta put that out there. You gotta put that in the notes under the image of, hey, it's the same image shot with two different exposures and kind of combined, because you certainly don't want to mislead people, but you want to build that vision that you have into your work.
Do you get a lot of people asking you for your settings on certain shot, like a shot like that? They say, "Well, what settings did you use?" Do you get that?
Yeah, I'll usually get at least one or two comments on an image, especially the astrophotography images, where people are curious about exposure settings, if you're tracking, if you're stacking, all kinds of things. And it's one of those things that I think astrophotography and just, really night photography in general, especially with how active the aurora has been, and, the clear skies that we typically have here, especially up in the Upper Peninsula. And, once you get away from major cities, you can see a lot in the sky. And a lot of people are starting to really get interested in that. And I think that it's certainly one of the driving factors behind it. But a lot of people are very curious about the settings, where you're at, um, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of interest in that.
I'll get it occasionally too, and sometimes it's hard because I'll tell them, well, it kind of depends on your situation. I'll get it for storm shots, for lightning shots, and I'll say, well, it depends on how close the strikes are. If I'm at a place that has a lot of light in the foreground, so it's going to change for every situation. I mean, there's a range usually, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too, especially with landscape photography, and, going back to what we were talking about there in the beginning of the episode, where, you don't want to necessarily go and just like copy somebody else's shot, but you want to, kind of go and experience that location. One thing that I've always kind of told myself about seeing somebody else's images and even sharing my own images is the conditions that the image that individual shot that specific subject under, or the conditions that you're shooting a specific subject under, are probably never in our lifetimes, anyways, going to be the exact same. They might be somewhat similar, but a lot of photography is all about the conditions. If you're out there shooting on a bluebird sky day, yeah, all right, that's not that hard to replicate. But in your instance, you have lightning, storm clouds. You're shooting these intense extreme weather events where maybe you have storm front blowing in over the lake with the lighthouse out in the distance, or a multitude of so many different variables that, yes, some of the objects will still be there. The lighthouse hopefully is still there.
Yeah.
But those conditions, they're unique to that situation. And that's one of the things I think that makes photography so awesome, is we're experiencing these places and capturing those moments, that moment that's unique to us. It's never going to happen again. It's beautiful.
It's funny you say that, because in the back of my head, one of the shots that I wouldn't mind getting is lightning actually striking the lighthouse. Maybe the top, not damaging, but just to have that shot. There's actually down in Chicago. There's a few people many people, but you get them hitting the lightning rods on the top of the skyscrapers, and that would be pretty cool. So
Yeah, every time those big storms roll through in the spring, I all of a sudden my Facebook feed, my Instagram feed just explodes with all these awesome lightning shots. I'm like, oh man, one of these days I'm going to make it out there and I'm going to try. But it's those things where you just never know. And some storms are huge lightning producers, or they have those really wild, intense, crazy clouds that just add that drama to the image. The times that I usually find myself kicking myself the most is when there's a storm coming in right around sunrise or sunset, and those dramatic clouds are just illuminated with that amazing light. You're just it always happens when I don't have a camera with me. I'm sitting there with my cell phone, like parked on the side of the highway, snapping pictures. Like, oh well, it's better than nothing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that is the one nice thing about being in West Michigan is I get it coming across the lake, and people ask me some of the things that I do. I love to have the storm in front of me, and if it's I know it's never safe, but as long as the strikes are ahead of me. Now, if it starts striking on the sides of me or behind me, that's when I get nervous. I say I don't like this. I like to have as much as control as possible. But so when you get it coming in over the lake, that's just a beautiful thing, and you get to see quite the view. But yeah, so it's funny you say about having a camera. Lately I haven't been doing this, especially extreme cold, but I'll usually just have my camera in my van at all times, because you never know, what's going to pop up. And but I mean, lately there's been a few situations where I'm like, I left my camera at home. Why did I do that? So yeah, that happens. Yeah.
It always makes me think. I was coming home from work. It was probably like 2015, 2016, and it was early spring. There was all these storm clouds passing overhead, and I live in somewhat of a rural area, but it gets dramatically more rural as you go like 10 minutes down the road. And there's not huge hills, but there's some rolling hills out there. And as I was coming up to this T intersection, I stopped and I just looked left, I looked right. And as I looked right, I looked up, and there was this one lone tree up on a hill. And these storm clouds just kind of opened up, and there was a perfect ray of light that came down right onto that tree. It looked incredible. And I was like, see, Nick, this is why you need to bring a camera with you.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I looked at it for the 5 seconds that it lasted. And I was just like, man, and now there are times where, not right now because it's freezing cold here in the Great Lakes right now, but there are times where, I got a Nikon Z30 a couple of years ago as a, little tool around pocket camera that I can bring with me. It's much easier to pack than my larger bodies, and it takes great images. I mean, it's a perfectly fine camera. But I'll leave that in my car now just in case, in those situations. And, naturally it's like, wow, look at this amazing sunset while I'm going to get groceries or something. And it's like, yeah, well, nobody wants a picture of Target. Like that's
But
not that impressive.
yeah, I know they have there are pages out there of department stores or grocery store sunsets where people are, it's like, oh, you can't find that along the lake, but you'll find it at Target. So
Yeah, I'll drive 8 hours to get to the Upper Peninsula, and keep my fingers crossed for something like that. And I can't get it when I'm on a photo trip, but you better believe when I got to go and get a slice of cheese and some bread to make myself some sandwiches this week, I'm going to see it.
yeah, absolutely.
But that's one of the things that I think really keeps us coming back, right? It's you call it the thrill of the hunt, if you
Yeah.
will. And, especially with shorelines, lighthouses here in the Great Lakes, there's so many just beautiful, incredible scenes and subjects and different areas to explore, especially in Michigan. I love going to Lower Michigan. Last year, my wife and I, we took the kids to Ludington. We took them to Grand Haven, stopped at Warren Dunes. I took a solo trip to St. Joe. And it's just, there's so many beautiful things. And I can't tell you how many times, I've sat here on the east side of Lake Michigan.
Sunrise, yeah.
Yep, we've got the sunrise side. And, we call it the Michigan Mountains because usually there's clouds on the horizon at sunrise. And over here, we're like, oh, well, the Michigan Mountains are back. But then when we get these big storms that blow through and, all that other crazy weather phenomena, they all go your guys' way. And then at sunrise or sunset, you guys are really getting those cool, dramatic, interesting forms, features in the sky. And, when the weather kicks up and it, especially here in the winter, when the snowstorms come through and the wind starts blowing, it covers St. Joe in ice. Or I've been chasing that for a few years and I have yet to get a shot of it. And fingers crossed that I'm not out of town if it happens.
I live in Grand Haven, so I'm literally just 2 minutes away from the pier. But a few years ago, I remember I was in Muskegon. That's where I work, and left early, and I knew there was ice on the Muskegon South Breakwater, and so I stopped by, and I didn't have my ice cleats with me. And the pier going out, it's usually about a 10-minute walk anyway. But it was slick ice all the way out there. And so I'm walking, like shuffling my feet. I don't know if people would know. There's Tim Conway on the Carol Burnett show, did this old guy that he'd shuffle his feet all along. But in the back of my head, I kept telling myself, my friend Dave Behrens, it's not that he doesn't have fear. It's like he has no connection. He doesn't get things. And so I kept telling myself, Dave would be out here. Dave would be out here. Dave. And so it took me like 40 minutes to get out there 4 times. But I got out there and it's like incredible, the ice formation and got some really cool shots, put a wide angle on and got real close to it. And, shuffled my way back. And, there's times like I could have slipped off and fell in the water and I'm done, but I wanted the shot. So I did what I had to do to get the shot. And, but yeah, the ice formations, now I have my ice cleats, so usually I don't feel as bad. They still tell you not to do some of this stuff.
Yeah. But, sometimes the shot might be worth it.
Yeah. So yeah, especially in Grand Haven and St. Joe, with the lighthouses out on the pier. I mean, when the waves crash and it's cold and it forms, it's just incredible. And I know there's been photographers that have been shared on, national news channels and, all over the place. And so it's nice to see that we get some recognition for that being so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I just saw this week actually that I can't remember the photographer's name off the top of my head now, but he had recorded, it was like a 30-second drone video clip of, it was one of the lighthouses out there. And it ended up on, I think it was Good Morning America. And there was
I saw that.
Yeah. And USA Today picked it up. And I was like, yeah, all right. I tell people all the time, people sleep on the Great Lakes. They think, oh, it's flat there. There's nothing there. And it's like, man, that couldn't be farther from the truth. There's so much here. There's so much to do. And then, when you see something that, a place you've been on national television, you're like, yeah, that's what makes one of the many things that makes this region so awesome.
My favorite is when people that haven't seen it, one of their first comments would be, you can't see across. I'm like, it's 100 miles, a couple 100 miles across. Yeah, you're not going to be able to see.
Yeah. It's not just a pond. It's, I tell people all the time, other, people that haven't been here or people that are curious are like, oh, well, it's just a lake, right? And I'm like, it's more of an inland sea, but the best way I can explain it is go look at the ocean. And they're like, oh, no, it's not that big. It's pretty big. It's not like you can just stand on one side and wave to Michigan. I mean, you certainly can, but they're not going to see you.
Yeah, I've taken the ferry across. We have a couple. There's the one in Ludington, but the one in Muskegon's a high speed one. And I'm out, an hour and a half into it, and I'm looking around, and there's nothing but water. And I'm, been on a high speed ferry for an hour and a half, so it's big.
Yeah, and to think it's not just Lake Michigan. There's five of these lakes, and that's one of the things that I think really amazes me is you get up to these things and you look at them, and to a degree you understand. I mean, I've grown up out here, and so have you. And, we're accustomed to it. It's you're used to seeing it. You can in a way comprehend the size, but then when these lakes they awaken and they start stirring, and you see these huge waves and just these crazy things happening, and it looks like it's a whole other world, and it's incredible because they go through so many transformations throughout the year, throughout the seasons. I remember it was around this time last year, actually, I had shared a video that I recorded. I went to the Michigan City Lighthouse, and I had recorded the pancake ice just kind of clanking together out there, and didn't think anything of it. I was like, yeah, it's cool. It's pancake ice, like I think it's neat. I uploaded it, started my 2-hour drive home or whatever it was, and wasn't looking at my phone, just figured, yeah, whatever. It's a video on Facebook. And by the time I got home in that 2-hour stretch, it had been viewed like 18,000 times. And it was filled with comments of people from all over the country. And they're like, dude, we got to go see this. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? It's like, Antarctica. It's like any of these, places in the Arctic Circle. And I'm like, it's just the Great Lakes. Like, this is normal for us.
Yeah,
But yes,
this is our
please come
home.
check it
Yeah,
out. Like, it's
yeah.
cool. It's cool to see it.
Uh, I have a similar. I have uh, photography friends all over the world, and one of my favorites is this guy. He lives in Russia, and he does a lot around St. Petersburg. But he'll go out into these remote, like old military camps, but a lot of them have lighthouses, and so he'll be out in the middle of nowhere in Russia with aurora going and light in these old lighthouses. And I'm like, wow. And to him, it's like, well, this is just where I live, this is, and I'm like, holy cow, I'd love to be there. So yeah, I know people, they'll see the Great Lakes and they'll say that about us. So that's why it's so nice to be, with, we mentioned Google Maps, but with social media, is connected with so many different people and so many different places. It's a incredible planet. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. And to be able to share that with people, and, especially these unique places and the beauty that is in this region where, I what you said there kind of made me think of something that, the longer you see something, the more you kind of become desensitized to it. So for us, seeing the lakes, we're like, it's Lake Michigan, it's Lake Superior. We have the ability to kind of take the creativity cap on and off and recognize it for what it is and recognize it for its potential. But then, you have people that come here that have never seen these things, and they're amazed by it. They're amazed by the size. They're amazed by what it does and the different areas and all these great things. And, it's always kind of made me appreciate those long drives, having to get up to the Upper Peninsula or having to drive a few hours to, get to Ludington or whatever, because it makes me appreciate more that it's not just right outside my front door, because then I get there and, to your point, you want to do something original, you want to do something creative, you want to do something that's unique to you. I feel like not having easy access to some of the things that inspire us, and we have to actually, work for it a little bit and maybe not visit it as frequently. It kind of contributes to that because, you know, take, any mountain range in the world, for example, call it the Himalayas. If you had the Himalayas right outside your front door and every day when you walked out, you said, oh yeah, well, there they are. And then,
Himalayas.
yeah, mountains, there they are. And then, somebody like any one of us who goes there and sees them for the first time, you're not going to get us away. We're going to be taking pictures all day, all night. Like, look how cool this is. And look at this. Let's go over there.
Where do I get a helicopter to get up there? Because I'm not climbing that thing.
Yeah, right. I'm not going up there. Not walking anyways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that's that really cool piece of being inspired and having that appreciation, that curiosity, that wantingness to explore. And, that's one of the things that I think it really draws us to the shorelines. It draws us to the unique geology and geography that defines these regions. It defines the lakes themselves. You have Sleeping Bear Dunes up in northern Michigan. You've got the Warren Dunes down in the southern end. And then you drive over the bridge, and all of a sudden you've got all kinds of rocks and, different shoreline. And
the waterfalls in the UP are incredible too. So, yeah.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw Bond Falls, I was like, this is in the Midwest. What?
Yeah.
What? It's one of those things where as you discover more, it draws you in. It makes you want to keep coming back. It makes you want to keep exploring and seeing these places and just taking it all in and finding new things. Like, I think all of us kind of have that drive to maybe get off the beaten path, do some bushwhacking, find those unique spots.
Yeah, and even as many times as I've been to Tequamanen Falls, which in Michigan, the two largest or the two most visited state parks are Grand Haven and Tequamanen Falls. So many people go there, but even though I've been there countless times, it's just I love being just standing there. And my thought is always, this has been going on since the first time that I saw it. And it's still rushing, it's still flowing water. And it'll be here 100 years from now, probably still flowing water. And it just blows my mind. I mean, think right now, it's probably frozen, but underneath there's water flowing. And so it's just that idea. There's a sense of peace to that I can go there anytime and go right back to it. So
yeah. And that's one of the things that, I tell myself that a lot when I'm getting ready to go out and do any type of photography, especially when I'm going to a place I've never been. I just try to remind myself, hey, it was here before I was here, and it's going to be here long after I'm gone. So if I don't get that amazing, incredible, awesome portfolio image, it's not the end of the world. I can come back. I can try again. And it just gives me an excuse. It gives me a reason to come back again. And that, for me, more than enough, more than worth it. Yeah. So, as you explore the landscape and, we've touched on the unique geography, we've touched on, seasonal changes and, the different phenomena and conditions and, all these different things. Of all the places that you've explored, of all the places that you've seen out there, if you had to pick the top 3 favorites that you would say are your number one top 3, what would you go with?
Okay, so this is going to be a little different. It's not necessarily a destination, it's an event. So top 3 in no particular order. Well, I know what my number 1 would be, but I'll say no particular order. Top 1 are anywhere there's a storm along Lakeshore. I don't care if it's a lighthouse, if it's through the woods, if it's lighthouses are good with storm, but anywhere with lightning striking. Moon is a big thing for me. I love the phases of the moon, especially the crescents, the setting crescents. So storms, moonscapes, and then I've only seen 2, but the total solar eclipse. There's nothing like it. And the interesting thing with that is I saw a shot years ago from Antarctica, and it wasn't a close-up shot. It was a landscape shot of a snowy landscape with some people standing there, and the eclipse wasn't necessarily the central part of the image, but it made the image, and that gave me the idea because I mean, normally we think, okay, I got a close up shot. I want to get the solar prominences. I want to get everything that I can. But that gave me ideas like it's a larger scene than just the sun, just the moon, and to put it in some kind of context. And so um, I have from the two that I visited, one in 2017 and one last spring, my the main shots for me personally were larger landscapes. So the first one, I have a tree, kind of, it's almost like a tree pointing to it. And the second one, I have a windmill. But I do have the close up stuff too. I wanted to, to get those. But I'd say so anywhere you can put me in a situation where there's something unique going on, even sunset sometime. So I don't care if I'm in Grand Haven or Muskegon or Whitehall or, at Little Sabo or in Ludington or in Manistee, or I mean, I can keep going up or keep going down along the coast. Just put me there with something cool. And so, like I said, I don't care where it is. I want to, witness something with it and to share that moment with that inanimate object in me. So that it's a little different, but so I mean, it's kind of like asking me which one, of my five kids is my favorite.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I
You
love
can't
them
pick.
all, right? And they all have something unique that I love about them, and I love to see that in them. And so I would say that. Now, for me personally, I live 2 minutes away from the Grand Haven Pier, so if if there's something going on, I can run right down. That's a beautiful thing for me, and so that's why I have a lot of Grand Haven images because that's my back door, that's my backyard. But I love to travel, and generally I like to travel north. The further north I can get, the better. And you mentioned about having that want or desire to be, trailblazing, to be out in the woods, to be along the beach where there really is nobody, and get something cool. That's what I like. So
Yeah, it's that visual storytelling of your own unique experience, the way the landscape spoke to you, the way the experience kind of resonated with you. And I really like what you said there too about how as long as there's something cool going on, it can be anywhere. Because that's one thing that I've talked about with other photographers, and it usually comes up in discussions around astrophotography where people will make the Milky Way the main subject, or some interesting something in the sky. I've always noticed that the most powerful astrophotographs are the ones with a well-defined subject. And, if the Milky Way is there or whatever they choose to include is part of it, but it's not necessarily the main subject, it's just complementing it. I really like how you said that with, as long as I can incorporate something cool with something that speaks to me, that's where I'm going to be, because I feel like that's a really great approach to photography. It doesn't always have to be like, we've talked about the solar eclipse here. If you have the eclipse with a lighthouse or a beautiful landscape or something that makes that eclipse part of the story, but not necessarily the story itself, I feel like it becomes a way more powerful image. It tells a better story. When you're out there, you're looking for something to include, you're looking, say something unique is happening. How are you choosing your subjects? Is there something specific that you're looking for? Is there something that you relate to more than something else, or is it just whatever kind of fits the feeling?
yeah, I think for me it's a lot about you do your research beforehand. Like if I'm going to shoot a moonset, I know what percentage, I know when it's setting, I know the angle it's setting, so I've got everything. I know where it's going to be, and then of course when you get out there, you're kind of you have to go with what the weather setting is. But I'll just kind of feel it when I get there, and it's like, whoa, I was going to shoot this, but this kind of looks cool over here at this angle. I didn't think about that. So um it's just listening to it and knowing it. And I know it sounds kind of like, I mentioned before, they're inanimate objects, but it's just kind of a partnership back and forth. And I've kind of always seen myself not necessarily as a photographer, but more as a conduit or I don't want to say prophet, but so I'm there to share this experience. Number one, I'm there because I want to experience it personally and be right there. But if I'm using a camera, how do I relay this to somebody else, and how would it be kind of cool to do that? So I'm just kind of seeing where it directs me at the time. And like I said, I'm a conduit. It's there. This I'm listening to you. What do you got for me? And it's funny because I remember I've only been one time up in the UP. It's the Keweenaw Waterway Light, and it's kind of a drive to get back out there. And I've seen it in photos, and I've always wanted to be there. So I get there, and it was a sunrise, and just had an incredible experience. And I just remember when I was leaving, I tapped the lighthouse and I said, see you soon, old friend." And it's just kind of like, how people are with pets or trees or something like that. I guess that's kind of the way I'm with the objects. And, I know better that they're not alive and that, but it gives me a perspective to say, I'm not above anything, that I'm just right along. I'm walking the path with everybody else. And I just want to be a part of that situation. So,
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. And, I do the same thing when I'm up in the Upper Peninsula. I make it a point whenever I'm at the Porcupine Mountains or whenever I'm in the Porcupine Mountains, I make it a point that before I leave, I go up to the overlook and I just kind of enjoy sunrise, take it in. I say bye, say, all right, I'll see you on the next one. I hike out and then I stop along the Engineers Highway there and I say bye to Superior and I'm like, all right, I'll see you soon, old girl, and hit the
yeah.
road and
Uh,
you start driving home. And I always, whenever I'm going down 64, I know there's this hill in the road where you'll come up and you'll see it one last time before you go back down. And I always look in the rear view and I just think to myself, hey, I'll be back. I'll see you later. And it's that connection where, of course, they can't respond to us, but that connection, that emotion that you have being there, where you feel connected to it. You feel like it's an extension of you and you're an extension of it, and we're all existing together in this beautiful place, but we somehow share the same experience despite one of us being alive and the other one not, you know? It's incredible. And I'm happy that you said that, because there's been a lot of times where I'm driving home and I'm like, am I just crazy? Like,
well, you are, but
yeah, a little bit.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know. I love all the Great Lakes. I live in Lake Michigan, but there's something to be said about standing Lake Superior and the energy that comes off that lake. There's nothing like that. And so yeah, you get that. So
Yeah, when you're standing there on the shoreline, and it's incredible because whenever I stand on the shoreline of Superior and I look out over the lake, I think to myself, the stories, the untold stories, the things that we'll never know that happened out there, the history that just goes unspoken. It builds into that connection of, I want to be here. I want to experience it. I want to be closer to it, but taking an image of it is about as close to it as I can get, because I can express that connection that I'm feeling through that image.
yeah, I have a friend who's a photographer as well. Known him for a long time, and he recently shared some old family photos from the early 1900s of relatives along Lake Superior. And to see that and to think people have been going up for a long time. And this is just one of those things, like you said, it's just one of those moments in time that I can view right here. So yeah, hopefully, I mean, people 100 years from now will look at your photos and say, wow, that, people that was cool. I bet you that was a really cool circumstance. I wonder what Nick was doing there.
Yeah. What was he doing here? What, what?
Did his wife know he was there?
Yeah, she usually knows where I'm at. She
Yeah.
keeps she keeps pretty good tabs on me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
She's like, yeah, I know you're wandering in the forest, but I got to keep you alive. So,
Yeah.
but and it's one of those things where, as you were saying that, I was kind of thinking back. I have the Porcupine Mountain companion books, and I have all 5 of them from the first edition to the final edition. And the first edition, it doesn't really have, or it actually doesn't have anything at all in it about waterfalls, but the second edition includes them, and then it kind of builds from there. But as you're flipping through these books, and each one has slightly different images from the next, it's really interesting to look at places, especially one of my favorite places to go. It's no secret. It's Lake of the Clouds, the Porcupine Mountains. One of my favorite things to do is to look at these images that were taken, 30, 40 years ago, at least in some cases, and just think about how much it's changed, how much things have changed. Like in the Geology of Michigan book that I just recently got, on one of the pages in there, they show the Lake of the Clouds overlook where they have the walkway and the platform and everything now. They show it before they built that. And you can see this little foot trail going up this just sheer drop on the side. And, people dressed in, it looks like maybe 40s or 50s attire. And, you look at that and you're just like, wow, that was what it looked like just not really that long ago. And then you see these trees, they grew, or these trees are gone, or those rocks have moved, or whatever. And then you think, in 100 years, what's it going to look like? In 1,000 years, what's it going to look like? And yes, to your point, you hope that the images you take, the moments you capture, the little pieces of your experience can be enjoyed somehow, some way, years from now in the same way. And it's incredible. It's that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've seen photos of Tequamanon Falls too, where people are underneath the falls. Of course, they don't allow that anymore. And so, just imagine what it would have been like to been down there, at Lake in the Clouds or anywhere along those. I love seeing the pictures of the car ferry before the bridge was built, the Mackinac Bridge, and think, wow, people are waiting for hours to get across. We, you know, for $4, we can get across real quick. So
Yeah, you just
yeah,
get right on, drive right
yeah,
over. You're there.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
And that it actually it makes me think. I got the third Porcupine Mountains companion book for Christmas. It was a gift from my sister. I had mentioned it to her in passing. I was like, "Yeah, you want to get me something? If you can find this version, go ahead and grab it." And I opened it up on Christmas, and I was like, "Oh, great! It's the book." And I opened it up, and there is a park pass from 1993, a park map from 1993, and a travel brochure for Ontonagon in there from 93. And it moved me because they're in perfect, flawless condition. And I was just sitting there and I was holding it and I was looking at it. My wife kind of made the joke. She's like, "I think you're more interested in these little brochures you found than the book itself." And I told her, I was like, it's not so much that one is more important than the other. It's that at some point in time, somebody went there in 1993 when I was 4, 5 years old, and they enjoyed the experience so much they hung on to these little mementos and they put them in this book. And now here it is in my hands. And that experience for somebody out there was so moving and so touching and so memorable that they hung on to these things. They put them in this book and they just moved on. And it survived all these years to end up here. And now I told my wife, I was like, I wish I could talk to the people and hear their story and hear, what was your experience? What did, what was the most memorable moment? And it's the same thing with our photography. We're doing the same thing, just in a different way, but it really is the same thing. My wife makes fun of me for it, but I told her, I was like, I think I might frame these and just put them up on my wall as, like a reminder of take that experience first. Cause that's what these people did. They took that experience, they enjoyed it, they relished it, they hung on to these little mementos, and here they are. It's incredible.
I do a thing with my classes. I teach high school, and once in a while we'll do a photo Friday where if we're caught up on things or if it's half day or something, and so I'll show a few of my images and then I'll tell them the story behind it. Like if it's a storm image, what was going on, or and so I think for the most part they enjoy. I mean, there's a few kids they don't care. They just want to be on their Chromebooks doing something else, but yeah, so I'm hoping to pass something along where it'll spark some curiosity, like you're talking about, and that they'll want to go out and see this themselves. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's,
Yeah.
spreading that just that spark, giving somebody that spark of the same curiosity that we have. Maybe we have this raging inferno inside of us of curiosity, and we can just lend somebody a spark to get them curious. And then, it's like passing the torch. It goes to the next person and the next person and the next person. I really love that. And that, how we arrived here is just, it's awesome. But, speaking of stories and everything that's happened or everything that you've experienced, what would you say is your favorite story or your favorite experience that you've had out there as a photographer shooting around Lake Michigan or in Michigan, as a whole?
Yeah. I think storms have been one of my favorite things. And as a kid, I've always, loved watching. I mean, a lot of people like watching the lightning storms. Um, I don't know if I have a favorite instance, so to say, but I do remember years ago when I was shooting film, I worked for Meyer in the corporate office, and I had my Canon A1, and one of the guys I mentioned him earlier, his name's Chris. He was working there. He was a product photographer. A storm was rolling. He said, "Well, let's." He said, "Let's set it up." And so he brought out a tripod, and I set my camera, and he helped me with settings, and we shot a whole roll. And he went back in and developed, and it was all white. They were all white, all blown
Oh
out. I'm like,
no.
oh. So fast forward years later, when I have this is 2014, so I just over the summer had purchased my first digital camera, and so is that September of that year there was a storm coming in Grand Haven. I'm like, so I go down, set up, and the first time I got a lightning shot, and it's not that good. I mean, I go back and some people have asked to buy some. I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't want those out there. That's but just to see that first strike and the rush that you get from getting that shot, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got a lightning shot, and now it's like I'm to the point where if it's not exactly the way I want it, I just discard. I don't want to share it. I got to have it exactly. But that first shot and that first time you get it, it's like I have the capability of doing something I never thought I was going to be able to do. And so, and that comes with a lot of different things, with what you shoot when you get that shot. And the beauty about digital is you get to see it before it's, before you develop it. But so when it pops up and you see that image, you're like, holy cow, that's so awesome. And it's not that I took it, it's just that it's an incredible scene that here it is. And I don't like to, I know a lot of people use the word capture. I don't like that. I like maybe recorded. I don't know. It's a recorded piece of history because I don't feel like I have any kind of power over it. I didn't capture it. It's just like it was shared. That moment that's shared now, and so I guess that, and I guess the story that I tell the most though is the 2017 eclipse story, and it wasn't even the eclipse. It was just that we never dreamed there would be so many people, and we were in a remote place shooting it. And so when we were done, we caught the eclipse, and rather than shooting the second half, we said, well, let's just get on the highway and get out of here. And we get on, in Southern Illinois on 55, and it's backed up. It's a 300-mile traffic jam from Southern Illinois all the way up to Chicago. We did 25 all the way up. And, you know, Dave, the guy I went with, and my son was with me, and Dave's wife called and said, you might want to stop and get gas because all these gas stations are running out of gas. And this amount of people, it was just, so I was in awe of how many people were down there and how many people had that desire to see this. And I didn't think that there would be so many people, but so that's always one, when I see that shot, I remember everything that went along with that. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember seeing that on the news that, it was like 12 hours or something of waiting for some people. And I remember on the eclipse last year, a good friend of mine, John, he wanted to go and shoot the eclipse, and he got a hotel. He actually had a few different hotels because of weather. He had, I think it was one in Texas, one in somewhere in Illinois. He basically had like picked hotels all the way along the path of totality. And he was like, I don't care. I'm going to shoot it right from the hotel parking lot. I'm not dealing with the traffic. And it worked out well for him. But the only reason I had not gone for the 2024 eclipse was my youngest, his due date was like 3 days, within 3 days of the eclipse. And I was like, no,
yeah, you're not getting out of that one.
no chance. And not just that, but I told my wife, I was like, he's going to show up on the day of the eclipse just because I'm technically only a few hours away, but with traffic, I'm like 18 hours away.
Yeah. So when was he born?
He was born April 13th. Yeah. He came a little ways after it, and I personally was sure he was going to show up the day of the eclipse because all the animals are going crazy. Everything's all out of whack the day of the eclipse. I was like, all right, he's going to feel that energy and he's going to be like, here I come. But no, he hung out and hung on, and there's another one, the one in Egypt. So, and there's more coming. Just got to be patient. So that 7-minute one in Egypt, though.
Yeah, that
it's tempting.
Yeah. Well, this time around this last spring, I was in Greenfield, Indiana, and I wanted to be away. It was Indianapolis was a good spot, but I wanted to be outside, so it's a couple of towns over. And on the way home, I told my kids, because I went with my 3 daughters this time, and I said, we're going to take the back roads because I'm not going to get stuck in traffic. And although there was a lot going on, I think there was several reasons why they said. One was because the last time it went from South Carolina and then across the United States through Oregon. So there weren't a lot of populated areas. This time it went through major cities like Indianapolis and Cleveland and Dallas. And so more people were already there. And they were more prepared this time. So it was nothing like that first time. They had no idea. They weren't prepared. So it was much better this time, but still, good for you that, just in case. And, I tell most people that probably my greatest life experience is being there when my children were born, but a very close second are the solar eclipses that I've seen. So yeah.
They're incredible. The images that come from those when especially under totality, for those of you, obviously you guys weren't here before the episode started, but we were talking a little bit about this before the episode, and I was in the 98%, path where it wasn't totality, but it was close, but that 2% is still extremely bright. It's not the same. And the friend of mine, John, he immediately was sending me pictures off the back of his camera, and I was just amazed. You could see, you know, everything.
It, as a side note, one of my favorite stories long ago is they used a solar eclipse to prove Einstein's theory of relativity, in the sense of where gravity would bend light, and they knew that if they could photograph uh, an eclipse, they could see the stars, and they could see stars that would be behind the sun, and that was what they would do. And so they, for years, they traveled around and went to where the eclipse were, and remote places, and it'd be cloudy or it would be raining, and so they finally got a shot, and it took them months to get it back and develop it, but finally they did. They were able to say, "Oh, his theory's right. There it is." And so, um, just just the stories that go behind that were cool. Can you imagine being one of those photographers traveling around the world trying to prove the theory of relativity? That'd be pretty crazy.
Yeah, they should make a movie about it because
Yeah,
I'd
they
watch
should.
it.
Yeah, yeah,
I'd 100% watch that.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we close it out here, if there was one piece of advice that you could give to a photographer, what would it be?
I I think I might even said this before. I don't know if it was before you record or not, but people ask me, "Well, what does it take?" And my thing is to shoot, and to shoot everything, to shoot all the time. One of my favorite. It's a sports quote, but I attribute it to all parts of life. Wayne Gretzky's quoted as saying, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." If if you're not out there, I don't care if it starts raining and it's cloudy and you miss out, you were out there. Because one of the times that you go out there, you're going to find something. Something's going to happen, and you're going to have that on your camera. So just take your camera with you and shoot everything. Just have some fun. Try to be creative. Do something different, but just shoot every day. And eventually, you're going to get something, and you're going to get better by learning your camera and doing everything. So that's always my number one piece of advice I tell people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that time spent just behind the camera, just learning and exploring subjects and just taking in the landscape
Yeah.
and learning how to speak your vision into an image.
Yeah. And even professionals will tell you that, there's times when they stumble across something. And my first time shooting Aurora, I wasn't shooting Aurora. I was shooting the Big Dipper over a tree, and there was something in my image. I'm like, what is that? So I took another shot, and I'm like, that's the Aurora. And so it was like dumb luck. I was just there, and then it started glowing. So I would have left if I had not, done that. So
Right. And that's one of the things with photography is, sometimes it's planning, sometimes it's skill, and sometimes it's just being in the right place at the right time. So that's great advice. I 100% agree. You just got to get out there, you just got to do it, and the pieces will fall into place. So, well, thank you very much for joining us, Walter. I certainly appreciate it. And I thank everyone out there for listening. Walter, how can people find your work? How can people, check out some of these images you discussed and learn more about you?
I post mainly on social media. I'll post on Facebook. My page is Images by Walter E. Elliott. And then on Instagram, it's walter.e.elliott with two T's. Elliott's with two T's, if you want to say that. But yeah, and I have links to websites and things like that on those. But that's mainly, I'll share all my stuff through social media. So
Awesome. And I'll definitely include all of that in the show links below for everyone to check out, everybody to take a look and go see some of his work and check out these images that we've been discussing here and you know look at the experiences shared through the images.
thank you. I appreciate it. It's been an honor. And like I said, to be number two behind Neil Weaver is a huge honor for me. So I love both of you guys' work, and just to be a part of this, I'm very honored. Thank you very much for having me here.
Of course, you're very welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here. And should we include the pizza story in here just
Oh,
to get
well,
get
just real
Neil a
quick. Yeah.
laugh?
Yeah. So I think the first time I met Neil, I was in the UP, and I was up there with some high school students that I was taking up on a little tour, and I just saw him in the parking lot at Miners Beach, and I'm like, "Hey, Neil!" And he's like, and he knew me, and so we had just got pizza from Main Street Pizza in Munising. If you ever go through there, it's the best. It's my favorite pizza. And so I said, "Hey, are you hungry?" And he was camping with his family. And so he's like, well, yeah. And so I gave him some pizza, and he was like, I don't think he shared it with his family, so maybe I shouldn't be saying this story. But so from since then, we've been the bestest of friends. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
The other day I was texting with him, and he mentioned, he's like, yeah, Walter and I became friends in a parking lot over pizza from the trunk of Walter's car. And I was like,
yeah,
well, that's a way to start it.
yeah, great. And I was such a great guy. I mean, he was just he did a remote. I taught a photography class at the high school last semester, last spring, and he was gracious enough to come on. And I don't think these kids realize, because I had a couple other people, but just the talent that they were learning from. And so the only thing better than his photography is him. I mean, he's just a great guy. So that's great. Nice to know these guys. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. And it's great. We have a wonderful, wonderful group of photographers here in the Great Lakes. There's so much talent around, and so many incredible stories being shared, and just beautiful moments, and amazing photographers. And I'm really happy that you, of course, being one of them, we were able to get you on the show here and discuss the many experiences and beautiful moments that you've had here. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for enjoying this episode of the Lakescape Photography Podcast. And another huge thank you to Walter Elliott for joining us. His work is linked in the show notes below. Head over there, give him a follow, say hello. Next week, we are going to be joined by David Behrens for some more discussion on landscape photography and the many beautiful areas right here in the Great Lakes. Thank you all for listening. See you guys on the next one. Take care, everybody.